Hey everyone. So during tough times, what choices are you making to lead your family? You know, life is a roller coaster, and I don't think any of us are going to disagree with that right now. Like the ups and downs and where we are right now in this moment is, well, how many times have we heard the word unprecedented? But it's true. We're in unprecedented times. And it's funny because I've tried not to talk about like this unprecedented time in my videos, but the truth is we're all going to remember this time anyway. So I think it's actually fine to bring this up. But what we're covering today is how do you create a foundation to prepare for events? Not just this event's like, you know, unheard of, but at the same time, we have life events that happen all the time. So joining us today, and you're going to absolutely be amazed at the information that she gets to share, but Mary Kelly, who has 20 years of experience at both the Naval Academy and Hawaii Pacific University, where she taught economics, finance, history, and leadership, and wait till I read her full bio to you. But her message is so perfect for the conversations that need to happen right now. She speaks in companies, but this conversation needs to also happen at the kitchen table, because you know what? The most important team you'll ever lead is your family. My name is Cheryl Bassett, and I am the founder of Unstoppable Connections, international bestseller, and creator of the award-winning Unstoppable Family Meeting Toolkit. I am also the host of this show, Kitchen Table Conversations, as part of the Edge Network. Families do tap into my four gifts, which is a reflection of the journey that my family went through and how we created an unshakable, unbreakable foundation. And so you can discover more about the four gifts and my work for connecting families at unstoppableconnections.com. And if you would like to be on the show or you have an idea for the show, you can also reach out to me at kitchentableconversations.com. So, I want to set an intention for the show, and I do this for every show because I think it's just so important to ground the show in this. The show does feature what we call the fun stuff, the tough stuff, and everything in between. So it's all designed, though, to ignite conversations, to strengthen your family, and to create a positive ripple out into the world. So that's what we're about today. And so what we do is we harness the power of the fourth gift that I get to share when I do share the four gifts, which is the gift of love. And how we choose to unwrap the gift of love is by celebrating ourselves and others. So it's with that intent and that heart that we open up every show to celebrate the person who came here today to share their heart, their expertise, and their passion with us. And certainly, Mary has so much to share. You're going to love it. So before I bring her on, though, and introduce you to her, I'm going to read her bio. And I do read them because I want to make sure I get them correct. But Mary Kelly is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy and spent over 20 years on active duty in intelligence and logistics. She retired from the Navy as a commander. She has a master's degree in history and economics and a Ph.D. in economics. With over 20 years combined teaching experience at both the Naval Academy and Hawaii Pacific University, she taught, okay, get ready, economics, finance, history, and management. She has extensive experience in business coaching, management, economics, finance, banking, insurance, real estate, government, organizational leadership, communication, business growth, teamwork, strategic planning, human resources, customer service, time management, and project development. Okay. I don't wow. So how blessed are we to have her here with us today? I want to bring her on so you can meet her. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Hi, Mary.
Hey, Cheryl, thank you so much for having me here today.
Oh, I'm so excited. And your bio, just like when I read it, I went, oh my gosh, like, I feel like we should do a quiz at the end. Like if you can just like list 3 things that Mary's done, but you win a prize. But no, like it's an honor to have you. And I really love to start each show by just like letting us get to know a little bit about you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, which obviously we know the big background, but just kind of how did this start for you as a passion?
Well, as you can tell, I work as a corporate advisor, so that encompasses a lot of different fields. But where I learned this was actually in the Navy, but I grew up in a small business family. And so I was working trade shows when I was, 10 years old. My parents would leave me alone at a trade show booth. I'm sure that would be frowned on today. But we worked together well as a family. And I was in the military, but the rest of my family was too. So this wasn't anything unusual. My older brother was a Marine. He married a Navy gal. My husband was a Marine. My sister was Air Force. She married a Navy guy. My younger brother's a Navy pilot too. He married a school teacher. We're all very confused by her, but we need her desperately in our family.
Yeah, so it's in your DNA.
It pretty much is. It pretty much is, but we're all really, really close. We text 20 times a day still because you said it. You know, your family, you have to lead your family. And once you learn those leadership lessons early on, it makes it so much easier for the rest of your life because you've got that great foundation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I always say, like, when we had our family meetings, that it almost became less about that hour we spent each week that we sat down and actually communicated, and more about how it was we showed up in life. It was everything that happened when we left the table, right? Individually and together. And it's just so important to have that connection and that communication. So I love to hear that you're still doing that, right? You're still communicating and connecting.
We still do that. Our dinner time conversations, even though we're geographically separated, we are still very close. And so we used to joke that our kitchen table was the best life training ever.
Mm-hmm. Well, what was that? There was a book one time, Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And I always feel like there should be a title, Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned at the Kitchen Table.
And that's exactly right. So for example, we learned you show up, you dress up, and you speak up. Yeah. And when you think about so many people who struggle in the business world or in schools, a lot of it is they're not dressing up, they're not showing up, and they're not speaking up. So we had to dress for dinner. You had to mind your manners. But you were also expected to contribute, and that was everybody. And it didn't matter if you were the oldest kid or the youngest kid, or if our friends came over, they were expected to do the same thing. There were certain things that were expected at our kitchen table.
That's great. I love it. I love it. So when you first sent me your title for your show, I mean, I have to be honest with you, I went, okay, I'm not really sure what that means yet. I mean, I wasn't sure how you were approaching that. Can you tell me? Because obviously, when we look at the title of your show, which is In Case of Emergency, Break Glass, right? Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Like, what's behind that?
Thanks for asking. So in many cases in the military, most of us, we train. You never want to use a lot of the skills you learn in the military. You just don't. You don't want to do that because that means you're at war or there's a conflict. Right. So it's kind of like in case of emergency, break glass, that you only need certain resources when there is a crisis. And right now, for many people, they are in crisis mode. Mm-hmm. We've never seen anything like this pandemic. And just for you, some people say, well, we've been through problems before. Maybe this is it. No, we have never before. And you got to remember, I'm an economist, so I'm going to give you a little bit more numbers than you probably wanted.
No, not probably. I love it.
But for some people, they're going to drool all over this, that right now you have to remember that for Western economies, we are dumping more than $8 billion back into the economy to restart this because we've had to shut down. That right now, small businesses, as you know, which are the lifeblood of our economy, they employ 47.5% of all of the people we employ in the United States. And that accounts for about 59 million people. Right now, they are really struggling, and people cannot run their business. They cannot get outside and interact with other people. Many people are now having to homeschool their own kids. So this is one of those times where it falls into the in case of emergency break glass. We are having to use skills and resources that we never had to use before. Mm-hmm. So the program that I'm talking about today that I want to get into is if something happened to you, and remember, it's not really an if, it's a when. We all know we're going to die. I mean, we don't want to think about it. We all think we're invincible, and it's great until you're not. And all of a sudden you think about, okay, do I really want to be and this is the worst case scenario. Do I really want to be on a ventilator, intubated, unable to speak, unable to communicate, unable to see my family, and now having to make life decisions about things like where my mortgage is, how to pay bills, did I do my will, do I have a trust, do I have a letter of instruction, are my children cared for in case something happens to me? Does somebody know how to come in, step into my life, and move things forward in a way that I want them? And that's what the In Case of Emergency program is. It's not a negative program. It's, this is one of those things that it's in the back of our head. It's always nagging us like we really should be taking care of our family. How do we best do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really no different. So a lot of things I do is about like if you're in the middle of a 911, that's not the time. Like if your house is on fire, you're not going to say, oh, let's go have a family meeting at the kitchen table and figure out how to get out of the house, right? So I think it's the same thing. It's just a proactive way of just saying, let's put the foundation in place so that when we have the 911, because that is life and it does happen, you're prepared and you know how to get through it and you've got things in place for it. So that sounds like exactly the same concept you're saying, like just
put the things in place now. So
yeah.
Don't be caught later. And now, especially when people are having more time at home, sometimes with family members, it is a really good time to have what are sometimes tough conversations about the what ifs. So some of the what ifs are, if something happened, would your partner, would your spouse, would your kids know what to do? And many people say, oh yeah, my spouse knows what to do. Well, that's fantastic, unless you and your spouse are in the same tragic accident. And then what happens?
Yeah.
Who is next? So I like to start people with something called a letter of instruction. And this is not a legal document. This is something that you write out in a Word document, wherever you want. You can scribble it on napkins. It doesn't matter. A Word document's better. And it's things like, I'm like, mine is to my brother. And it's, hey, if something happens to me, this is where the spare, because he lives in Florida. I live in Colorado. So he doesn't know where my spare key is. He doesn't know what my dogs eat twice a day. He doesn't know where the dog food is. He doesn't know that my youngest dog is on medication. And it's just a letter saying, hey, thanks for acting as my personal representative. Here's what you need to know. This is who my lawyer is. This is their point of contact. This is where my will is. This is where my trust is. This is the binder where all the information is in my house. This is what you need to know so that from Florida, you can start making things happen to care for my dogs, to care for my kids, to make sure that the school knows who needs to pick them up. All of those things. The other thing is we've got aging parents. Now there's 4 of us. And we're all mostly responsible, but each of us kind of have our roles. Like my older brother is tech support. My younger sister is, the resident MD. I'm logistics. We all kind of have our roles with my parents. Well, in those cases, I've got their Grubhub account set up. I've got their grocery delivery set up. I've got their medical records on file. So in terms of that, all of a sudden you start thinking about all of your roles and what that looks like. And a letter of instruction tells people where that information is. So you might want to say, by the way, here's my vet, here's this, that, but all of a sudden that then becomes this huge document. So a letter of instruction needs to be kept fairly simple, updated often, emailed out to that person and other people who may be affected, like your neighbors. You say, look, I want to make sure all my ducks are in a row for my family, just in case something should happen. And again, right now, this uncertainty has caused people to reflect more on that. Yeah. So you might want to share that letter of instruction with your neighbors and say, hey, if my younger brother shows up or if something happens to me, you got to call my younger brother because he's the guy, right. So you have to let people know. So that letter of instruction just tells people who those next people are who can step in. And then once you've got that letter of instruction done, then you get into the details. And those are those forms that I shared with you about senior care, child care, dog care, cat care, those forms that I shared with you.
Yeah, which, by the way, anyone who's watching or listening later, all of that's going to be dropped into the chat box here. You'll be able to find it in the notes and tap into those because I love that she, that Mary, you opened those up for everybody to kind of grab onto. So, and right now I'm just loving what you're saying because I think we just think about it being such a legal thing. And the truth is what you're saying is this is just a simple write a letter. Like it doesn't even actually matter if you spell the words right or, it's just get a letter out so that people have an understanding. And I can't imagine how valuable that would have been for us with my mom when she passed. When my dad passed, he was much more organized, but even just that simple letter from him would have been helpful,
Right. And so
all the legal stuff, but
yes, many people think, oh gosh, I can't do this without a lawyer. So certainly there's a few areas where you desperately need a lawyer. And I'm talking a lawyer. I'm not talking about something online that you print off and get notarized and hope it works. Any good lawyer can destroy anything done online in a courtroom situation. So the idea is many people don't want to go to a lawyer because they think it's going to cost so much money later. But when you think about it, you think, okay, a will, which less than 40% of Americans have a will that's even updated. So that's bad. I think if you're over the age of 21, if you can vote, you need a will. Even if you don't think you have assets, it doesn't matter. It legally gives somebody else the right to act in your place. And that's critical to settling your estate. And even if your estate is just your car and an apartment, you've got to make it easy for other people. And that's really the whole point of in case of emergency, break glass. make it easy on people left behind. And yes, I know everybody's invincible. We're all going to live forever until we don't. So you do need a lawyer for things like the wills, the trusts, and the medical powers of attorney that dictate who gets to call the shots if you are unable to act on your own behalf. And this is critical right now, especially if you don't have a legal relationship with someone, or you're that person's best friend, and maybe their next living relative is the crazy half-sister or crazy half-brother or some other relative that they certainly don't want to make those decisions for them, but you're their best friend and you're the person they trust. So that's where you need a lawyer. And people oftentimes balk about the cost. I'm like, well, wait a second. When you think about it, if something bad happens to you, and you might be dead, but you might also be just languishing. You could also just be very, very sick. You could be injured. You could be a lot of things. Then all of a sudden, somebody's going to have to go to court to figure out custody, be able to make decisions. When you think about the average lawyer cost per hour in our country, $300 to $400 an hour, and maybe they're spending 10, 12, 15 hours on your case. Well, guess what? A good trust would include a will and medical powers of attorney, and all of that would be done. And you would be assured that what you wanted to have happen is actually happening, not the courts, not someone else. You get to take control. And this is a fear factor that we also need to manage during a time of uncertainty, is that during times of uncertainty, and we certainly have that right now, people are scared. We have to take control and take action in that order. We take control by making the right decisions and then deciding to take the right actions to, again, protect our family and our friends from what could be years of trauma, bankruptcy because we didn't properly plan. Making decisions. When you give somebody the power to make a certain life or death decision, and they're not sure what you want, think of that one-way guilt ticket that you just bought somebody. And that's just not fair. Our job is to take care of our family.
Yeah. And you know, so when I shared with you before the show that, you know, when my father passed away, he really had crossed T's, dotted I's multiple times over. And now I'm just like so grateful, right, for the fact that he did that. And I have one sibling. So it wasn't, you know, we navigated it beautifully. Like, you know, we didn't like no arguments over anything. I think there were like maybe 3 things that he said, oh, I'd like to have that. I'm like, great, go for it. You know what I mean? And I kind of wanted it to, but I just like, it wasn't worth, right. And I know, but when you have more too, I think if it's not clearly laid out, right. Like I've seen so many families kind of fall apart.
They fall apart because again, people get it's a very emotional time. And that's one of the things that we have to give people some grace about is that it is a highly emotionally charged time. And many people think they're doing the right thing and other people's right thing conflicts with what they think is the right thing. So I'll tell you, I love my sister. My sister and I are super close. We actually got married together in the same ceremony, like walked my dad down the aisle at the same time. Like we're close. It was great fun. It was a double military wedding. It was fantastic. But nobody on the planet makes me as insane as my sister. And Cap, if you're watching right now, I make you insane too. Because again, we were raised together. We shared a room. We had the same background. We had the same conversations. She was Air Force. I was Navy. We've got a lot of the same. We at one point in our careers, we were doing the same job, one base apart. She had the job at Hickam and I had the job at Pearl Harbor. We talked a lot, but we make each other insane because we expect each other to react the way the other one would. Like I expect my sister to react like I would, to think like I would. And that's an unrealistic expectation. So this was clear to me when I was working on a book on this and I realized, oh, that's why we make each other crazy. It's not that we don't love each other, we do, but we make each other crazy because I expect her to react the same way I think I would react. Right. And especially when there is trauma or uncertainty or vulnerability, now those heightened emotions exacerbate every single thing that's going on. And people feel very strongly about this. Now, the other part about it is crises is like separating the wheat from the chaff. Some people are made better by this. Some people are made much worse. Now, for those people who are made much worse, and you've seen families fall apart because of this, sometimes it's something stupid like, well, I wanted that painting on the wall. Mom always said I could get that painting. And somebody else says, no, Mom promised me that. And then that becomes a point of contention that is never resolved. So this is why you have the conversations early. You have the conversations calmly. In my family situations, we do it at the dinner table like yours. We're older now, so now we have it with wine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're separated, right? So obviously it's online and, whatever. I mean, technology is amazing because of that. Obviously, sometimes we need to put the technology away, but it's just being present in that moment. But technology allows families, I think, to still connect. And as a military, I mean, I have so many people that have talked that are in the military, right? That's the only way you can stay connected.
That's
Sometimes.
right. And for
Yeah.
most of our careers, because all four of us were military, we were geographically separated for most of that time. And so what happened, how I started this whole program was my husband was military as well. And he wound up getting cancer and dying from Agent Orange exposure. And I was sitting in his ICU room. And I always have a pad of paper with me. I'm a copious note taker. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, there should be a checklist for this. There should be, what do you do? Mm-hmm. What do you do? And so as I'm trying to find checklists, and this is before, the advent of all this online stuff and as much as is out there as possible, I'm sitting there making checklists of things to do and things to think about. And we were military. We prepared for deployments. We had the will and the trust and the powers of attorney and all of those things. We had it all in place, but there were still things that we missed. And so as I start to make this checklist, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what are my friends doing? So after my husband died, several of my friends said, so would you be our executor? Would you be our personal representative because you've been through it? I said, yeah, but you got to make it easy for me. So the way to make it easy, and I went through a few iterations on this, was forms. So this is where I put together the binder that I shared with you. And that is, it's about 130 pages of manuals. And 130 pages sounds like a lot, but there's a lot of words. And in between the words are, you can skip over the words and go right to the forms. This is what I need to know about you. These are some of my closest friends, but I didn't know where they were born. I didn't know where their birth certificates were. I didn't know where their divorce certificates were. I didn't know where I didn't know the addresses of their grown children. And you got to remember, for different people, it's a different trigger. For many people, it's, oh gosh, I got married. I have to take care of my spouse. Or, wow, I'm suddenly a parent. I need to take care of my kids. For some people, it's the dog. It's all of a sudden, one of my good friends said, oh, but you'll take my dog. I said, you don't understand. If you don't specifically put this in your will and your trust, I can't take the dog because the state considers your dog property. And my friend said, my dog is my best friend. I said, but the state doesn't recognize that. And while I agree with you and I will take your dog and love your dog forever, that's not how the states interpret this. And many states interpret things very differently. It's why, we had the conversation about where we were before the show started. Like in the state of Maryland, let's say you're on your second marriage and one of you passes. Well, wait a second. The state says if you die without a will, then your grown kids get half of your stuff, even if that's not your intention. And now your surviving spouse has to sell the property so that they can pay off your grown children. Wait a second, that was never the intention. Yeah. These are some things that you just need to know. And again, we've got 50 states and every state is very different. And so we've got to make sure that we comply with those state issues, as well as if you've got assets in different states, your stuff is going to go through probate. So if you don't have a trust. So a will goes through probate. A trust essentially tells the courts, hey, guess what? We've got a trust, and the will just bypasses probate because the trust is responsible for doing everything. If you've got a difficult family situation, maybe multiple family members, maybe some difficult things, and you don't want certain things made public, remember, your will is a public document. A trust is not. A trust can also do things, again, make decisions, and tell your family you love them from the grave. And I think you've got some experience in that.
Yes, I absolutely do. I was joking, but grateful at the same time, right? That I said my father does control the trust that he set up. Bless his heart for doing it for, from the grave, because it's very structured. There's a lot of clarity about how it's supposed to unfold and happen. So, and we were blessed that we have an attorney who was a friend of the family's. It's funny because he actually used to deliver groceries for a grocery store when he was like a young kid, and then he grew up to be an attorney, and so he's been a friend of our family's forever. But he's the one that got to handle that. So it's nice to have that connection. But I know you said too that when you shared this with your dad.
Yeah. So I had gone through a few iterations, and then one of my friends said, "Hey, can you?" And this was never intended to be a product. I never wanted to capitalize or profit from my husband's death or what the lessons I learned from it. That was never the intention. But I started to think, wow, when my parents decide to, go on to their heavenly reward, it would be really nice to have all this done as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the book that I put together, and I'm not sure if you can see that, it says, "In case
Yeah.
of emergency, break glass." It's all full of forms and things like that. I shared it with my dad. And when I first said, "Hey, Dad, I'm doing this thing," my dad tells me, "Oh, yeah, I got all this done." My dad is super organized. Like, he's super organized. And he had this big old binder. And I looked at this binder and I was like, how do you have the conversation and say, "Hey, I really want to review this. Would that be cool? Do you have an updated will? Do you have an updated trust? How do you ask these questions? What do you want to do?" So what I did is I said, "Hey, Dad, I really appreciate you putting all this together for Mom and for all of us. And this is amazing. Would you mind doing me a favor and look through the manual?" This is like the third iteration at this point, "and tell me what I missed." So if you're a dad out there and your daughter asks for advice, you pretty much say yes.
Yeah.
So my dad did it. And he worked through he took his entire binder, he organized it the way I have the manual laid out.
Mm-hmm.
And then he calls me later, I was back in town, and he says, "Hey, I want to show you something." And sure enough, he had organized everything according to my manual. And he looks at me and he goes, "Do you know I missed a few things?" I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay, that's great, Dad." So the great thing about it is this is now the binder. I wanted to call it something cool, like the Death Binder or the Death Star, or something really, magical, something really exciting. And my marketing person said that was not a good idea. So this is where we came up with the title, "In Case of Emergency, Break Glass." It is on Amazon as a perfect bound book, but it is also on my website at productiveleaders.com. And that's where you get the 3-hole binder version if you want that. And again, Cheryl, I'm just so delighted to share this message with your listeners and your viewers. And for anybody, if they want that, I will also, and they just send me their information after they get the hard copy book. I am more than happy to share the online fillable PDF version with them so that they can, again, work through it with one family member, maybe Mom, and maybe Dad lives in a different state, or maybe they want to use it with their grown kids. So if they get the one thing, again, it's easiest to look at the hard copy and then work through it online. And they just send me their receipt, and it's info@productiveleaders.com, and I will send that. To them.
Okay, so I want to repeat that because I think this is like an amazing, amazing thing that you're doing here. So if you go on Amazon and buy the binder that you just shared with us, right? And they get that. But the thing is that everybody needs to have that binder. Every family member needs to have that binder. So what you're saying is there is an online version of that as well. And if you buy the binder, the initial one, and then send the receipt at info@productiveleaders.com to Mary, she's then willing to send you a online version of it where you can fill in and actually work online. And am I saying that correctly?
That's exactly right. You can buy the online version, and it's automatic on my website. But again, I'm not here to sell stuff to your viewers. They can get the 3-ring binder, inside on the website. But again, I'm also willing to share that fillable, downloadable PDF that they can use over and over and over and over and over for their family members with your viewers.
Wow, like amazing. So yeah, I'm excited about. I'll be like, I'm in there. I'm doing it because I know there's a lot of things we're missing. My dad right now is like smiling.
Well, your dad was so organized, and
he was. Yeah.
And he was way ahead of his time, because many people did not realize that you can help your family years and years and years after you're gone. You've made it easy for them because you're organized. They know where things are. And I can't tell you how much of a gift that is to your family.
Yeah.
And so you and I both know, Cheryl, we can go through nightmare situations where people think, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know this about my spouse," or we thought we had this done. And in my own case, because I know we're at the end of the show, so one of the lessons I learned, my husband's insurance policy was left to the woman he was dating when he went to Vietnam, not his wife. And it was because he had never changed the beneficiary. Which would have been me. And the insurance company said, "Well, this is a very unusual situation." And I said, "Well, let's hope it's an unusual situation." And again, We thought we were organized. I thought we were organized, but I never thought to say, hey, baby, where is that beneficiary on your life insurance policy? The life insurance policy did go to that other person. They had not had a relationship. In case some of you are wondering, wow, is there something really interesting going on? No, he was just really bad at keeping up with paperwork. And so there's a lot of funny things that over a beer I can tell people that, but it's really not suitable for live streaming. But anyway, the insurance company said, well, we'll give her the option to do the right thing and turn this over to you. And it's an option she did not, exercise, which again, okay, but you didn't even acknowledge it. And I think that really hurt me the most. So if people get nothing else out of this, go back through and look at your IRAs, your SEP plans, all your life insurance policies, your credit card things. Many credit cards have a rider that says if something happens to you, somebody gets $1,000. Your bank statements, make sure you update those beneficiaries if you get nothing else out of today. And it makes a good story and it makes people do it. So I'll take that.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, for all of you who are on your second or marriage or more, I'm second, but I'm just saying, I know that you might want to go back and check something. I don't know. I'm just saying, right? You don't even think about those things, right?
Well, you don't. And let's say you went and, you started to work at a corporation when you're 25 and you signed the paperwork and you never think to update it 30 years later for that initial paperwork. And that's the other thing is, let's say your initial corporation's insurance policies were with, say, United, and then they change every 3 or 4 years. So now it's on Progressive or Prudential or whoever. And then 35 years later, you pass and your spouse calls up the company, that calls that number that they've got in the original paperwork. And they go, we don't have an account for Cheryl Bassett. What are you talking about? And so you kind of go, oh, okay. And you hang up the phone and you don't realize you've been paying on that life insurance policy for 30 or 35 years. It's just changed companies. Billions of dollars, Cheryl, goes unclaimed because people don't know how to find that money.
And there is a division of unclaimed funds.
There is, but
again, in a while, but
again, when you're emotionally distraught, you've just been through the worst experience of your life, losing your parent, your spouse, maybe a child. It is the worst time of your life. It is not the time when you think, oh, where's the money? You just don't think that way.
Absolutely not. No, definitely not. So, yes, we are at our time, but it's like your amazing information. But I guess I wanted to ask you one more question, and then we're going to close with the dot, which we talked about, which is like our little pearl of wisdom, which obviously there's a ton in here. Like I already wrote down, show up, dress up, and speak up. Like that's a pearl of wisdom right there. And I love that. But so if a family were sitting down, do you feel like the workbook and things like that, is there a certain age where kids could engage in this? Like, so they're younger, or do you feel like this is really the conversation that the parents have, or the individual sits down and works on as a parent? And then, then are there conversations that younger family members could come into? And if so, what's that age kind of?
Great question. So first off, you as the parents have to have the conversation with each other first, and you need to be honest with each other. And some of it's just logistics. Hey, if something happens to me, where would you want to get buried? Would you want a memorial service? Do you want, what do you kind of want? So that there's no ambiguity with the two of you. And then you talk to your kids. Now, if your kids are younger than about 12, 14, I would say probably not the best conversation, but they do need to know, in case something happens to mom and dad, who do you call first? I actually have wallet cards made up. Mm-hmm. And I started doing that for my seniors in case they fell and people didn't know who to call. You need to call this kid, you need to call the neighbor, you need to call whoever. But your kids need to know, in case you're worried about mom or dad, or if you're worried, who do you call first? And a lot of families do not have that in terms of a structure. So kids need a card. It needs to be in their phone. It needs to be, hey, if for some reason you come home and mom doesn't, and you're worried about where mom is or where dad is, you need to know who to call. And that, I think, is anything over the age of about 5.
Okay. Perfect. And I would assume you could also designate a place like, okay, so if anything ever happened, here's where all the important stuff is. You don't have to get into what it is, but just here's the important stuff, right? It's all in this.
I have a bright blue binder, and it is everything that you need, because out here in Colorado, we had a couple series of fires where people had about 2 minutes to evacuate their house. And that is the one binder you grab off the shelf and you run. And I'm talking, if you have 1 minute to get out of your house, what do you grab? That binder has everything. This is why the manual is so helpful. It's got, your wedding certificate, your birth certificates for your kids. It's got, the deed to your house and where things are. It's got all of the important paper. I encourage people to put it together in a binder so that it is something you can grab in 10 seconds, you know where everything is. Because for many of us, we're like, well, it's somewhere in the file cabinet behind me, and it would take you 6 hours to dig through it. Now, many people think I don't have time to do this. The binder is set up where you can do it in like 10 minutes at a time. And I encourage people to use sticky notes. So you fill it out, and that's easy stuff. That's the green. And then if you need something else, it's just a quick, oh, I can look that up really quickly. That's just a green sticky. And then something that's going to take a little bit longer to find, maybe you're not sure where that information is, that's a yellow sticky. And then something that you need to have a conversation about, that's a red sticky, because it means it's going to take a little bit of focus. But the idea is to work through the binder or the paperwork in just about 10 minutes at a time. Make it easy. And again, this is not something you fight about. It's not something you argue about. It's planning. Planning trumps uncertainty.
Love it. Love it. All right. Amazing. Thank you so much. I learned a ton, and I'm really excited that that the families are going to get to hear this. And, this goes into to where they can access it long term. So, and I know, I'm just thrilled about that. So, so we leave with a drop of thought. Always end the show. And so if you were going to leave a dot, like a parting thought, what would that be?
Life is a finite number of unknown minutes, so don't waste them.
I love that. Yeah, perfect.
So spend the time with the people you care about, spend the time doing the things you love, spend the time making a difference, because we don't know how long we have, and we just have to maximize every single minute on the planet.
And I feel like right now people are hearing that maybe in a way they haven't heard before. Right. So it's kind of that's the silver lining that gets weaved into tough times sometimes. Right. And mine is always, I just, my heart's always with the family. And so I just, believe that ripples don't flow in, they flow out. And if we really want to see change out in the world, that it starts with us, and it starts in our own homes with our families. And often that starts at the kitchen table. So thank you all for being here, Mary. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing. I love your heart and your passion for everything you're doing, but just amazing information. So thank you.
Cheryl, it's been my honor. Thank you so much.